Hey again! It's time for another Q&A session. Since our regular donor was feeling a bit under the weather, shall we say, to which I hope they'll feel better soon, I've taken the liberty of gathering questions from one of the soon-to-be Saorsa alpha testers, so that we have a video this week. So, what question do we have today? Well, let's just quote it off word for word, shall we? Do you already have an adventure on your mind, or are you gonna make it up as you go along? So basically, is it gonna be a more on rails thing or an open world? It's pretty straightforward, so let's get right to the answer. In short, yes. Oh, that wasn't a yes or no question. Well, that doesn't bode well for this being a 2-minute video, does it? No, it does not. Alright, so what's the deal? Well, see, Saorsa is being designed in such a way that GMs can do pretty much whatever they want with it. There's room for adding new species, new settings, even entirely new planets to the basic game from the very start. GMs like to make their own adventures, their own worlds, and so on. And I wanted to make certain that such were available to them to do so as they see fit. On the other hand, Saorsa is also meant to be a game that teaches players how to roleplay, especially players and GMs who really only have done dungeon crawling, murder hobo rampages before. Those who have only played RPGs on video games who don't realize the near limitless possibilities of the tabletop RPG media, and players who are completely new to tabletop RPGs as a whole. This means leaving things too wide open without any kind of a direction towards where to go, or what to do, just isn't gonna work for many of these groups. As such, the game's being built with all of this in mind. Let's go through a quick overview of what the game's rough plot and world is, because this will help to give a better idea of exactly what's going on and why. The basic concept behind Saorsa is the planet, which is the game's namesake, is essentially a penal colony. The entire planet is devoted towards the rehabilitation and redemption of individuals who wind up there. Now, specifically, how you get stuck on Saorsa in the first place is you have to commit a sin against yourself. In particular, you have to break your own personal values at a deeply fundamental level and show that you really don't understand who you are. This is a key part behind teaching players how to roleplay a character, because it's a starting point that both strong role players and completely new ones can both begin at. It's alright if you don't know who your character is, or can't really get into their shoes or understand them all that well, because they don't know who they are either. If they did, they wouldn't be stuck on Saorsa in the first place. Some of the settings concepts are kind of railroady and somewhat linear, in that there are key points in the game that characters kinda have to go through by default. The path to redemption is a core concept in the game, which revolves around players making key points of understanding their characters by confronting their decision to break their values and figure out why they did something that goes so abhorrently against what they claim to believe in. The beauty of this is that it makes sure every character has at least a few major plot hooks to work with, so that a GM can customize their campaign to the characters that are being played, but can still have a lot of room to do stuff within the larger context of the world or other plot threads that may be going on. As such, the game is mostly non-linear in terms of the basic stuff built into the setting itself. Saorsa is designed so that in the setting itself, it's completely canonical that the land masses shift and change. New mountains are formed, cave systems are created, even new species custom built for characters to face as challenges on a regular basis. As such, the world is living and shifting at all times, and there are a lot of different factions that live there as well. So, what does all of that mean? Well, basically a GM can do anything they want with the setting, more or less. You don't have to follow the primary plotline as listed. It's just a basic starting point that allows for adventures to be built around such easily. That being said, I tried to build the basic plot in such a way that there's some linearness to it and a great deal of room to maneuver. See, the more linear a story is, the more you know what happens and can plan stuff out in advance. This almost always leads to a more intricate and clever story, allows for foreshadowing, and so on. The more open world a story is, though, the less control you have, but the more a player's choices matter. As such, both of these things have their pros and cons. By having completely, totally open world game, you wind up with a game that doesn't really have any focus or direction to it most of the time. But if you railroad the players, then you may as well not have a game because their choices don't really matter, which we kind of covered in last week's video. So, the way I tend to run things when designing a game, or being a game mistress, is I try to make larger plot points relatively static events where I more or less know pretty much everything that happens, and have workaround backdoors for when players try to screw with that, because they invariably will try to do so, and then leave the rest of the events open with some smaller points being a bit more narrowly focused. Basically, all roads lead to Rome, but that means you can take any road you want to get there, or go off on a detour as much as you like, and still eventually reach your destination. So is Saorsa going to railroad players or be open world? Yes. The degree to which it does so is going to be dependent mostly upon the players and GMs running the game. But the game as it's written gives tools with which to lean in either direction based upon the preferences of those playing. In particular, the game's built so that every character has an awful lot of potential plot hooks attached to them, so that you could just explore a single character's story for months on end if you felt like it without even touching the main storyline. Which means the story will always be unique. Even if you played the same main story 10 times in a row, if you played it with 10 different characters, about 80 to 90% of the time would be completely different each time. Where the characters themselves matter in the grand scheme of things, which is something a lot of GMs have issues with, I found. Where their players have no real impact or say on what happens, or it simply doesn't matter which characters are there. And that's something I really want to emphasize on getting people out of the habit of doing. You have unique player characters. Make use of them. Anyway, Saorsa does have a bit of a default plotline to it, but it's pretty loosely defined so that GMs and players can explore stuff as they desire and make their own characters and world. If it were too linear, such wouldn't be possible. At the same time, the specific plot that does exist is such that it does have some linear aspects to it. Every character, at least under the basic rules, does need to eventually follow the path to redemption in Saorsa, which is a clearly defined series of epiphanies about one's motives and values. It doesn't matter if you're an evil warlord or the most righteous paladin. You still essentially follow the same path to learn who you are. The specific events can differ, but the key points are fairly static in nature. So, again, to answer your question, Saorsa kinda goes both ways. And with that, I'm out. I'll see you next time.